far in 2024. So that is, I think, 36 books as of the end of June. So I figured halfway into the year I'll do the tier ranking of the books I've read so far, and then at the end of the year we'll top it up with the books I've read in the second half of the year. So I will quickly introduce my tier, and then I will get going, because why not? This might be a bit of a longer video than usual, but we'll see. So right at the bottom of my tier is Get in the Bin. That is for anything that is atrociously bad. Above that you've got Don't Waste Your Eyes, in that it's not the worst thing you've ever read, but why waste or strain your eyesight and bother looking at the pages. Then you've got Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. It's not a book that I would ever, to be honest, I just really love that saying and I try and use it whenever I can, so it doesn't really make sense in this setting, but hey ho, I love it. So this is just for the absolute mid-average books. Not my problem. Don't want it to be my problem, so I won't be reading it again. Then we head into the good category. So now we're starting to get into the decent books. And then Please Sir, May I Have Some More, which is the kind of mid to high. No, not mid to high. Yeah, I guess mid to high. And then the very top, the top echelon of the books I've read so far. This is what dreams are made of. So you have to stay tuned and see if anybody makes that. Don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, we're just going to jump right in. Just a quick caveat as well, in that I apologise if you can hear the fan on this laptop. I don't usually film with this particular one, so apologies if it's quite noisy. Well, as I go through the books, I'm not going to talk about them in too much detail, just because I do a monthly wrap-up where I do in-depth reviews of each of the books, so I have a handy-dandy playlist on YouTube so that you can go through and watch all of them, but I will just very briefly let you know about these books so that it makes sense as to where they are in my tier. So, book number 1 was a self-development book. So I kicked off in January trying to work on myself, as I'm sure most people do, and Never Get Angry Again is the book. It pretty much does what it says on the tin. It is trying to teach you how to avoid flipping out at people or making irrational decisions, and tries to give you steps to make that better for yourself. I will say I didn't find it the most effective book. It was okay, but it wasn't anything special. So for that reason, Never Get Angry Again is going to go into Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. It's okay, but it's no better than that. Okay, so the second book of the year that I read was The Hate You Give, and it was in the best of the best category in my book list, which was the 2018 Goodreads Choice Awards. You'd think, I say it so often, you'd think I'd be used to saying the book list by now, but apparently not. But it is all about a girl called Star, and she lives in, I guess, kind of a rough neighbourhood in America. She is black, but she goes to a private school, and it's kind of like she exists in both worlds. And then there's lots of other things that are going on at the same time, but it's very much around Black Lives Matter. She witnesses a crime, which is essentially a hate crime perpetrated by a police officer, and I think it's classed as young adult fiction because it's centred around Star, who's a teenager, but it is phenomenal. It really is. I absolutely loved loved it. I could not fault it whatsoever. It was heartbreaking, but also it was actually quite humorous in places, and the writing was just... So I don't think it will come as a shock that The Hate U Give, for me, goes straight into This Is What Dreams Are Made Of. It scored a 10 out of 10, which is incredible for the second book of the year. Book 3 of 2024 was the first personal choice selection. It was the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman, and that is The Man Who Died Twice. I liked the first one, which I read at the end of 2023, but I much preferred this second one in the series. I think because you already know the characters now, you don't waste that much time on the background, it just jumps straight in, and I think I liked the story in general as well, and there are a lot of twists and turns, so you're not entirely sure what the end result is going to be. So I think I'm going to give that, on this list, I think I'm going to put it in Please Sir, May I Have Some More. It's not the, best of the best, but it definitely comes close. So, I'll leave it there. Okay, book 4 is looping back round into self-development. So if you are aware of my reading process, which if you've been watching my channel, you probably should be, it goes self-development, book list, personal choice, and we would just go round and round like that. So, back into self-development. And this book was the book you wish your parents had read. So for me, it's a conversation I started having with my husband as to potentially starting a family, and so before we kind of go down that road, I wanted to try and educate myself a bit more on what to expect, or just I guess more like the kind of parents that we might want to be. And this book is very much in the, I guess, more, I don't want to use the phrase gentle parenting because I think it gets too much stick, but very much around the emotional intelligence aspect of bringing up children, and that is very important to myself and my husband. So I really enjoyed the book. I found it really insightful, and I definitely feel like I learned a lot. So I think, do I want to put it in Now We're Talking, or Please Sir, May I Have Some More? Or I don't know. I think I'm going to put it in Please Sir, May I Have Some More, because I think I did learn a lot from it. And I think Now We're Talking is too, just above average for the book. So, yeah. You'll see can be quite indecisive, so hopefully it's not too bad going forward. Okay, book 5 is actually a personal choice book, so I'm trying to cast my mind back, but something obviously went wrong. Or I made a decision to switch the order around, but hey ho, we'll go with it. So book 5 was Shrines of Gaiety, which is written by one of my favourite authors, Kate Atkinson, and it's set in London, and there are loads of different characters, and I guess the central figure is this woman called Nellie, who's been released from prison, and she's essentially a kind of crime boss. She runs a franchise of pubs, so it kind of revolves around her and all the different pubs she has and her children. But then you've also got the main character who kind of goes undercover to work in these pubs, find out more about the family and report back to the police. It's okay. I was kind of disappointed, to be honest, because Kate Atkinson's books for me are usually really gripping, and it did get better towards the end, and I think it's because of the sheer amount of characters that are in there that it takes a while did. So I think I'm going to put it in Now We're Talking. I would recommend it if you've read Kate Atkinson's books before, because it does get into it, but other than that, it's definitely not her strongest work. Book 6 is a book list book, and it was in the science fiction category of the 2018 Goodreads Choice Awards, and that was Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. This series, it's the Red Rising series. I can't remember what number this is, but previous books in this series have been on other book lists I've done. It wasn't my favourite out of the series I've read so far. I read one last year, I think, which was a lot better than this, a lot more intense. This one, I just didn't find it as engaging, and I'm not gonna lie, I actually feel like I'm kind of over this series now. I think it's either 4 or 5, and I'm kind of hoping it doesn't pop up again in other book lists, because I'm pretty sure there's one more. So I don't think it should come as much surprise that I'm going to put this right in. It wasn't awful, it wasn't amazing. So I think Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys, if you like this series, it may rank higher for you, but it's not something that I would like to revisit. Okay, next we are back around into self-development, and this book is called When You're Ready, This Is How You Heal, and it's essentially a collection of essays. Sometimes it's just a quote, it can be a listicle, trying to cover, essentially they're like little pep talks to try and make you feel better about where you are in your life, and how you kind of want to move forward. So it could be advice, it could be affirmations, it kind of covers a range. I enjoyed it. I definitely found some of the essays more helpful than others. Some of them, and I've read, her name's Brianna Wiest, and I've read some of her work before, and I found that too hard to get into. I kept getting tripped up by the language, and that does happen in some of these, but then others I actually found really insightful and really almost like you're hearing the right thing at the right time. Like there's ones about starting new jobs or the end of something, whether that be losing a loved one, as in like they've died, but also in terms of like breakup, making just a big change in your life in general. So I did find it useful in that respect. And so I don't think it deserves to go any lower than Now We're Talking, just because of how much it got me in the feels with some of them, and it genuinely made me quite emotional. And so I don't think it would be right to put it any lower than Now We're Talking. Book 8 is a book list book, so the order appears to be back to normal, yeah. And this was my least favourite genre ever, and it is the romance category of the 2018 Goodreads Choice Awards, and it was called the Kiss Quotient. And I really liked the main character, Stella, but the other main character, Michael, I couldn't stand by the end of it. It really... And there are just certain tropes in romance books that I just find myself rolling my eyes at, and I get that a lot of people like that style because it's like escapism, or they're just romantics at heart. And I've said it before, I'm not. It's not that I'm not romantic, maybe I'm just more cynical when I read stuff like this. So I gave it at the time a 4 out of 10. And I actually think it's going to be the first book to go into the Don't Waste Your Eyes category. I don't know that it's terrible enough to go into the bin. I feel like that might be a bit too too harsh, because I did like Stella, and I liked the way she was written. It was just towards the end it really started to lose me, and then there was definitely a part towards the end that pissed me off. So, yeah, don't waste your eyes. Okay, so the next book is a personal choice book, and it was called Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. And it was actually a book I found in the airport when my husband and I were coming back from honeymoon, and it was one of 2 books that I bought. And this one really appealed to me because the blurb basically says that everybody in his family has killed somebody, and then every section of the book is a different member of his family and how they came to kill somebody. And it all takes a very different look. I don't want to give anything away because there are so many twists that I never knew what was coming. And it's also so clever. It's very unique and really funny as well. I highly recommend. It's by an Australian author, and I think he is a comedian turned writer, so very similar to Richard Osman in the Thursday Murder Club series. But I actually think I found this one more clever and more unique. But is it enough to go into This Is What Dreams Are Made Of? I do think it's probably a book that I would recommend, like for anybody that wants to read a really good crime book. I think maybe I would recommend it because it's very different. So maybe I would put it in, but then no, you know what? I think that should be reserved for 10/10s only. I think I'm going to put it in Please Sir, May I Have Some More? I think that makes more sense. I did slightly prefer it to the Thursday Murder Club series, but they are quite similar in other ways as well, so yeah, I'll make my peace with that. Another self-development book, this time focused more around business, and it was called The Unfair Advantage. So I did a video where I read 3 books that YouTuber and productivity expert Ali Abdaal recommended on his reading list, so you can check that video out. But one of the books was The Unfair Advantage. It was quite basic. I find it a hard one to talk about because I'm not the right demographic necessarily for it. I think it assumes that you don't know much, if anything, about starting your own business. That's the premise of the book, is essentially finding what makes you unique as a person, and so and then using that to your advantage when starting your own business. There is a section at the end that is around the logistics of setting up a business and how you go about getting investors, and that was useful. I actually feel like the Unfair Advantage section was less useful for me, or I think it could have been condensed, because once it's been explained, I do think it's fairly self-explanatory. So yeah, for that reason, I think it has to go into Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. I think it's very average. There's a couple of things that are insightful, otherwise, yeah. Okay, so if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I can't seem to ever avoid Stephen King when it comes to my book lists, and 2024 has been no exception so far. So the horror book, horror, was Elevation by Stephen King, which is actually a short story, so at least I didn't have to sit through because I know some of his books are chunky as hell. but never horrified, never, I don't know, the way horror books are supposed to make you feel or think. So I was going to put it up here, but I actually feel like I would recommend that you just don't waste your eyes. Especially because it's a short story. If you like Stephen King, I'm sure he has better works than this. Okay, back to personal choice. My next book was Killing Moon by Jo Nesbø, which is the most recent, I'm pretty sure, Harry Hole detective book. Harry Hole is the main character, he is a detective. I can't remember what number this is, but I have to say it is one of the weaker ones. I was a little disappointed with it, if I'm honest. I think some of his recent ones, like there's The Thirst, and another one, I think it might be called The Knife, which are insanely good. Like, terrifying, but amazing. And I just don't think this one was anywhere near as good as them, and I hope it's not a sign that he's running out of steam, maybe with the character or the story. So yeah, it was okay. There were parts of it that got better, and the ending was like you don't want to stop reading because you want to get to the end, but I don't think it was anywhere near as some of the others. Do I put it up here though? I don't think it's mid. And I think if you like Jo Nesbø's writing and you like Harry Hole, then you will might like this. I will say don't read this book when you're eating. It makes you feel a bit sick in places. I think maybe now we're talking. I think it's definitely not mid. It's just not as strong as others, so when you compare the series. But yeah, so I think we'll leave it as now we're talking. Okay, so back to self-development. I will say there's not usually a theme or a thread between my self-development books. It's just whatever takes my fancy or whatever I feel like focusing on in that particular month or at that time. So in, I can't remember what month we're up to now. Let me have a look. March. So in March, I was looking for books around dealing with grief, and I was recommended by a viewer to read The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, and it's pretty much a memoir about her losing her husband while her daughter was severely critically ill, and it basically goes over the year after losing her husband, how her daughter recovered, or the kind of the journey she went on. I think it was good, and I always find with grief books, even if you don't necessarily learn anything, it's comforting enough to know that you're not alone and that you're not weird or abnormal for experiencing or feeling things the way that you do. And I think that was, I guess, the predominant thing that I took away, that some of the thoughts she had about her husband that were almost irrational because she knew he was gone, but she couldn't let go. That really, really struck a nerve with me. Other bits, the way it's written is a bit more, I'll say poetic, but very, I guess somebody who's more artsy by nature, if that makes any sense. So it's written in that kind of a way. Now, where do I rank it? I feel like, I don't know if anybody has this, but I don't know if it's because of the content of the book that I feel really bad if I put it in Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. It wasn't average. I think I found it comforting. So do I put it up here? Definitely no higher than this, but I don't think it's average. I think it is slightly better than average. So now we're talking for the Year of Magical Thinking. We are flying through. I feel first book is called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was, I want to say, the memoir category of the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2018. And it was written by Michelle McNamara, who basically the book focuses on the hunt for the Golden State Killer. Unfortunately, Michelle passed away before she finished the book, so it's hers up until a certain point, or actually I think she had started writing the book, but most of it is pieced together by her husband and friends, or I think she may have had a co-writer as well. Forgive me if I'm messing that up entirely, but yeah, a lot of it is pieced together just from the work she had done, and then they've put it into this book. It is terrifying, honestly, the Golden State Killer, and how much he evaded capture, and also the escalation of his crime is insane. And just the sheer number of crimes he committed, I had never heard of him before. And I think he was operating at the same time as that Night Stalker, or similar era, who I had heard of and I'd seen a documentary of, but never this one. And it really actually got under my skin and really freaked me out. So be mindful of that if you get affected by books. But I think because of that, I will say the one thing that I was a bit about is the fact that she was kind of like a keyboard warrior, in that she kind of inserted herself into this story and this narrative. And don't get me wrong, like, she did amazing work piecing together bits that maybe the police were missing, or I don't know. But then there are times where, like, at one point she was fixated on somebody being the killer who wasn't. And if you've seen, there's a documentary called Don't F With Cats, and if you've seen that, you'll know the kind of feeling that I mean, that if you go after somebody and you're so determined that it's them, you could ruin their life if they're innocent. Not that she does, but it's just that kind of a... I think some people are very keen to get involved in things that aren't involving them. But maybe I'm just reading too much into it, because the book itself was good, and I'm just rambling now. But I think it's because I'm like, where... I think it needs to go up here, to be honest. Just because of how much it got under my skin, and how interesting the crime was. It jumps around a bit, but I don't know if that's because they were trying to piece it together. So I think I'm gonna sit it here. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Personal choice next, and it was a crime book called Murder in the Family. And I chose it because I was looking for a book that was as unique as everyone in my family has killed somebody. And the way this book is written is almost set up like a Netflix or like a true crime documentary. And so it has like the production notes, scripts, emails between cast members. And so I was very intrigued by that. And I do think a lot of work must have gone into making it feel like a documentary. But I think that is where it kind of like stops and starts for me, because I did not like the crime itself. I think it was actually really boring. I don't know why that crime was chosen, or why it went in the direction it did. It's just, I don't know. I found it really... I think they could have, or the author, Cara Hunter, could have chosen something so much more interesting that could have gone off in so many different directions. I just think it was really... It was very meh for me. But would I say don't waste your eyes on it? just say it's very meh. This is hard. This is where my indecision comes in. I'm a Libra, so maybe I think I'm going to put it here because I think some people may like it a lot more than me. Yeah, and I liked the premise format enough. Yeah, if you're going to read it for that, not anything else. Self-development, and it was another book from the Ali Abdaal books on it that he recommends, but this one was actually one that he himself wrote, and it is called Feel Good Productivity, and I thought this was really well structured, really well written. There was a lot of information in there, but I think it was very accessible in the way he laid it out. And there were some genuinely useful things in there as well. So I'm not going to waste any time. I think I would put this in. Please, may I have some more? I do recommend that if you're struggling with procrastination, perfectionism, anything like that, and you need to understand or learn some techniques that could help you, then I definitely recommend you read Ali Abdaal's Feel Good Productivity. I think we might almost be halfway through this. And this next book was the fantasy pick, yes, from my book list, the Goodreads Choice Awards, and it was Circe. I'd never read a fantasy book that centres around mythology, and Circe is around Greek mythology, and I really loved the way that the Greek myths that are very well known are weaved into the story, and kind of Madeline Miller's own take of them. So it does, at least to my mind, it does stay fairly true to the myths themselves, but I'm assuming there's like embellishment around it. I freaking love this book. I loved it so much, and I actually think this is one of the first books that has tipped me into exploring whether I do actually like fantasy, or has encouraged me to read more fantasy, because I couldn't get enough of this. I loved everything about it. I loved Circe. I loved the myths. I loved the way it was written. Oh, chef's kiss. So I have to, it is going straight up to This Is What Dreams Are Made Of. 10. If you haven't read it, I can't recommend enough that you give it a go. Okay, something a little different for my next personal choice book, and that was because I chose to read a collection of short stories, and they were supposed to be in the horror genre, and they are by Joe Hill, who coincidentally is Stephen King's son, which I did not know until a viewer pointed it out to me. The difference being, I read The Fireman by Joe Hill last year, I think, and it was phenomenal. Loved it. So I thought, oh, interesting. His dad let me down with Elevation, so maybe he can do better. And one of the short stories is The Black Phone, and that movie is incredible. So I wanted to understand the source material of the short story. And I was so disappointed. I don't think I liked a single story in this book. They all seem to be just really weirdly written, as in like some of them just did not have an ending. Some of them were just a bit gross and just so like, what? The Black Phone, I much preferred the movie. I don't know, I feel like they made it so much better, which may be sacrilege, but I think the screenwriters did a great job. And yeah, I was very disappointed. I think I would put it... I actually think I'm going to put it get in the bin. I was that disappointed by it. And I actually think at the time I rated it, I think I ranked it far too high for how I actually feel about it looking back. So, yeah, our very first get in the bin ranking. I feel like there has been some disruption to my reading process again this month for whatever reason. So we actually have another personal choice book, and this was Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, who is the author of All the Light We Cannot See, which I loved. And I think it was seeing a trailer for the show or movie that reminded me how much I loved that book, but also kind of prompted me to go and look up his other works and read a different one. So Cloud Cuckoo Land was the choice, and it is a beastly book. It is huge, but I really like the characters. I think there's 3 different characters all in different moments in time, and I love the way each of their worlds is written and described, and then how it kind of weaves together. And there is a story of Cloud Cuckoo Land that is the main narrative that goes across all 3, and I think it's so clever. I would say I think it took me a little while to get into it, but I really enjoyed it by the end, and I would definitely recommend it. As to where I would rank it, I don't think it deserves This Is What Dreams Are Made Of. I think Please Sir May I Have Some More is the most fitting for this book. Okay, so the next book is Self-Development, and we're back into the grief subgenre of self-development, and this was actually another book that was recommended to me by a viewer, and it is Crying in H Mark by Michelle Zauner, and it's about a woman who loses her mum to cancer, and how, so it kind of gives you the story of their relationship, and then her mum's illness, and then her death. But woven into this is the fact that Michelle is mixed race, so her mum is Korean and her dad is American. So as well as her grief, it's also this attachment to her culture and how she's grown up feeling like she doesn't really fit in either world. She doesn't feel like she fits as being an American, but then she also doesn't feel like she fits as being Korean. And I found that absolutely fascinating. I found that so insightful, because it's not something that I've ever, or probably will ever, experience myself. And about how that kind of almost complicates her grief, because losing her mum makes her feel like she's losing that tie to her Korean heritage, and trying to explore that further and regain or build her attachment or build her understanding of her heritage after her mum's gone. I loved it. I really did. I really do recommend it. Even, I was expecting it to be a book around grief, and it very much is that, and it's very touching, and there are some points in there that just made me cry so much, because it's so accurate to how I felt, and especially at the time I read it as well. But I just love that other layer that she speaks about as well, and her writing is great. So, is it This Is What Dreams Are Made Of? Critics' Choice Awards, and it was very interesting to me because it was kind of another book semi-rooted in mythology, and I'm pretty sure it's West African mythology. Apologies if I've got that wrong. And so it was another book that I found really fascinating. It's a bit more in the magic territory than Circe, but I still thought it was really interesting, and I loved the setting and the characters. I think when a book gives voice to minority groups, I think it's just great because it opens up to such a wider audience, and it is a very well written book. It was another book that I was like, maybe I do like fantasy after all. The only thing I didn't love is one of the subplots in there, or that it definitely is starting to be explored. I could have done without that, but I know that it's very popular in fantasy books, so I can get it, but it's not really for me. So that definitely stops it going up to the top. I actually don't know if it fits in here. I did really enjoy it, but it is also part of the series, and I don't know if I'm that bothered about reading the other books in the series. Like, I liked it, but I didn't love it that I'm chasing down the next books. And maybe it's because of that subplot. So I actually think I'm going to put it in. Now we're talking. But if you like fantasy, I do actually recommend you read it, because I feel like I'm just too much of a fantasy noob to put it higher. The next book is Personal Choice, and it is book 3 in the Thursday Murder Club series, and that is The Bullet That Missed. So, back with the gang. Again, it just kind of jumps right in. Was it as good as... So the first one, I'm pretty sure I scored it like 7 out of 10. The second one was a 9 out of 10. That was definitely my favourite. Book 3 was really good. Very funny. I think this might actually be the funniest one. But there was something about it that I didn't like as much as book 2. But it still was great. Like, it was a very good addition. So I think I'm going to have to put it up in the same place as book 2 in Please Sir, May I Have Some More, because it is also a series that I have devoured. I'm pretty sure book 1 was the end, the very last book I read in 2023, and so it's a series that I've been covering as quickly as I can in amongst my other reading process. Okay, self-development. This one was just more of a general self-development book, I guess, and also is pretty non-standard. I think my thinking at this point, my thinking process was I'd read some quite heavy books and I wanted something that was just a little bit lighter, and so I chose Me versus Brain, because it's all about overthinking, but it's actually more of somebody, or the author Hayley Morris, relaying her stories to, I guess, help you feel less alone, like you're not abnormal, but it's all told in a very humorous way. And it was weird because I chose the book and I started reading it and I was like, why does Hayley Morris ring a bell to me? Why have I heard that name before? And then pretty much immediately reading it, and one of the stories, I was like, I swear I've seen a TikTok about this. And then it turns out that the TikTok I'd seen is from Hayley Morris's account that I follow. And yeah, it was just such a coincidence, but I would say it's just as funny as her TikToks, if you like that kind of thing. I think it's really good. I really enjoyed reading it. I think it is comforting, and sometimes you laugh with her at her, can relate it to your own cringy experiences, but it's not a conventional self-development book, but it's still a nice, easy read. So where to put it? I think I would put it in Now We're Talking, because if I put it against Crying in H Mart, I don't think it's that same level, even though it's a different type of book, but I think Now We're Talking is where it comfortably fits. History next. This was in the book list category, or book list process, and it was The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. I was in two minds starting this book because there are, as much as I love dinosaurs, we had a fireworks display at our wedding, and one of the songs that I chose was Jurassic Park theme tune. But as much as I love this subject, history books can be incredibly dry, and then it kind of just loses me completely. And there are parts of this book that are very technical, goes into a lot of detail about paleontology, and how they kind of figure out how old dinosaurs were, or what period they lived in. But that is a small part of the book. What I loved about it was how the author, I think his name's Steve, sets the scene for the different periods. So you obviously have Jurassic, Triassic, Cretaceous, and Permian, I think. But he really does make you feel like you can envisage everything around you, especially when it comes to the extinction of the dinosaurs. I found that absolutely fascinating. And then the different types of dinosaurs that existed at different times, also great. So I do think, yes, some parts are a little drier than others, but overall it is really interesting. And if you like dinosaurs, I highly recommend you read it. And so I would actually put it in Please Sir, May I Have Some More, because I think it really is a great book, and you'll learn a lot as well. On another personal choice book now, and it was a book called The Five, which is essentially talking or giving a voice to Jack the Ripper's victims, because they've kind of been lost to history a little bit, while the focus has been so much on who Jack the Ripper was. And I really like, and the reason why I chose this book is I really like that someone has gone to the trouble of putting together these women's lives to give them their voice, and also because there's so much misconception about them and who they were. They got labelled as ladies of the night, when actually, as the book explains, I don't think any of them, I think one of them was an active lady of the night, but the rest weren't. Some of them never were either. And so there's just this horrible twisting, or this horrible perception of them. And it's so sad that that's what history has just labelled them as. And I will say this book did make me mad. Not at the author or the content, but just at the way women were treated in Victorian times, and how they couldn't go anywhere by themselves without being labelled as a fallen woman, a lady of the night, or just an absolute reprobate. And it's just awful. The lack of power, lack of control they had. It's very in-depth, to the point where I think towards the end with some of the victims, it started feeling to me like a little bit too much embellishment was happening, and a lot of assumptions made about their characters or what they were doing and how people interacted with them. I think it started losing me a little then, because it started stepping a bit too much into not being reality in my mind. So I think I would give it, I do recommend it, as it gives a very good backdrop to Victorian England, to the representation of women, and does for the most part give a good view into the 5 women's lives that were taken by Jack the Ripper. And I love that he doesn't really get mentioned at all, because who cares? It's not about him. So I would recommend it. I just don't love it because of the embellishment. The next book is another unconventional self-development book, in that it is The Little Frog's Guide to Self-Care. Oh yeah, I've got it here, I'll show you. It is a teeny tiny, very short book, which is just full of pictures of a sassy little frog. She did that, yeah. And, you know, it's probably like a sentence on each page. But again, I was just kind of more in the mood to read something a little bit lighter, and it's really cute, and the illustrations are fantastic in it. I just think it's a really nice little book. So I would put this in now we're talking. I think I would feel too, because there's not that much writing in the book. I feel like it would be a bit unfair to put it higher, but Now We're Talking is very cute, do recommend. I love the boots or the shoes the frog wears on every page, so definitely check it out for yourself. Okay, I'm pretty sure this was the humour category for the 2018 Goodreads Choice Awards, and that was The Last Black Unicorn by Tiffany Haddish. I feel like every humour category has had a memoir or a biography by a comedian. I love reading about people's lives. I find it fascinating, even if I'm not necessarily a fan or know much about their work. However, there's something about the way this book is written that I just couldn't vibe with at all, and I think it's because it's trying to sound like she talks, and I just don't think it works. It almost comes across quite childish and immature, and considering some of the things she talks about are quite heavy, I don't know, for me it just didn't work at all. And there are some stories in there that I really feel for her, and I do think it's atrocious. But other stories I'm like, doesn't necessarily sound like she's always the nicest person. Yeah, it's not a book that made me want to go and watch any of her films, or I think I've seen a couple that she's been in, but it hasn't made me want to seek out her stand-up or anything like that. I think if you're a fan of her, then, I mean, you've probably already read it, but I guess it'd be worth checking out for that. If you're not a fan of her, or you're like indifferent, then I would give it a swerve. I think I would say don't waste your eyes. I don't think there's that much. It's not funny. So, I don't quite know why it's in the humour category, maybe because she is herself a comedian, but I didn't laugh once, so yeah, don't bother wasting your eyes on it. Yeah, personal choice. If you remember earlier on in the video, I spoke about books that I bought in the airport. Everyone in Killed Somebody was the first one, and the second was this book, which was Chain Gang All Stars. And the best way I can describe it is it's the Hunger Games meets Gladiator. Prisoners compete in these things called death matches, but they can win sponsorship, they can earn like food, weapons, advantages over their opponents, and the prisoners are kept in a gang, and they're called chains, and they are links in a chain, and they fight other chains in these death matches, and they're mostly black prisoners. And so alongside this story of this, I think they call them hard action sports, you also have this other narrative about Black Lives Matter, about wrongful imprisonment, or the way, or like abuse of prisoners, and it's just very, very clever because it weaves in these real stats about what happens to people of colour in prison, or what the suicide rate is of prisoners, the abuse rate, and so while you're kind of drawn into this incredibly written, incredibly detailed world, you're also having your eyes opened and your mind opened to what is happening. You know, this hard action sports a dystopian future, but then it's also giving you insight into what is currently happening in the prison system. And it's just very, very clever. The characters are amazing. There are a lot of characters to kind of wrap your head around, because you've got the prisoners or the links in the chain. You have like the creators, the prison systems of the games, and then you have the protesters who oppose the games. So there are a lot of people, but I don't think that hinders it at all, because you need all these different perspectives to gain an understanding of the world in general, and it just is so intense. It really does read like a movie, and it just, is so good. I've never read a book like it, to be honest, and I honestly, I'm not even going to come at me if you think different, because my god, you're wrong. It deserves to be up there. Incredible book, incredible. If you haven't read it, read it. Okay, we just have a handful of books left now. So the next one is young adult category in the 2018 Goodreads Awards, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. And this actually is another quite unique book in that the perspectives are split into. So you have a podcast host who is talking, investigating the disappearance of Sadie, the titular character. And so you've got like this perspective and the clues they follow and the path they take. And then the other perspective is Sadie herself, because she's run away from home to track down her sister's killer. And so it's so, I will say the one negative is that it did take me a while to get into it, especially from Sadie's perspective. I think it needed the podcast bit to speed it up a bit, and also because her bit is written not poetically, but definitely a bit more artsy than the podcast, which is very straightforward. But then once you kind of, I guess, know and understand Sadie more as a person, you really are in it, and the twists and that tension you feel is incredible. One thing I would say is the blurb says that the book will haunt you, and it kind of does, to be honest with you, so just bear that in mind if you are going to pick it up. I think I would give it, I feel like there's quite a lot of books up here, but I actually would really recommend it purely because it's another very different book. it's really well done, and I do think once you've kind of got into the story, it is very all-encompassing. Self-development. This book is called Tiny Traumas, and it's basically, the reason why I chose it was because it covers things that happen to you that at the time you don't think are that big of a deal, but then the more it happens, the more it compounds and becomes a big deal. Or it's something that's happened to you in your past, and then at the time you don't think it's a big deal, but then looking back you're like, maybe that had more of an impact on me than I first gave it credit for. And I find that concept really interesting, and so I wanted to explore that a bit more, especially around, like self-confidence, or it also covers a whole host of aspects of your life, from confidence, procrastination, perfectionism, kind of a bit of everything. And it's really, I just found it really fascinating, and I like the way it's structured as well. It kind of gives you the backstory to the specific tiny trauma, and then kind of shows you how you can accept it, and then the action point is the activity or something that you can do to move forward in your life from that tiny trauma. I really like that. I love a self-development book that is structured well. And I do think there is a lot of content in there that people will find useful. I do think it suffers from the same thing that most self-development books do, in that it becomes a little repetitive, and I think some of the sections could be condensed. But for the most part, I do actually think it is a pretty good self-development book. I don't think it's as good as Feel Good Productivity though, in terms of the accessibility and format. So I think I'm going to put it in now. We're talking. A couple of months ago now, I bought a mystery book box from eBay and decided to read one of the books at this point in the year. And the book that got chosen was The Broken Souls, which is a crime/thriller book. And I think it was written in the early 2000s, but to be honest, the way it's written, you would think it was written a lot longer ago. Like the way the characters talk to each other, the way women are described, it's just a bit like old-fashioned. And I'm not gonna lie, like this took me a really long time to get through because it was a struggle. I didn't like the way it was written. I don't think the story made any sense. I actually think it contradicts itself at the end to how the crime was set up in the beginning. I think there were so many leaps to try and close the gaps in knowledge, or to get to the big reveal. The main character just seemed to have an epiphany. I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you, there was nothing I actually liked about this book, and I have to put it in the bin. The copy I have, let's see if I have it. I haven't already thrown it away. The copy I have says, better than James Patterson on all your money back, and I genuinely feel like I want my money back, even though I bought it on eBay. Yeah, trash, in the bin, don't bother, please don't bother. Okay, the final 5. So, the next book is self-development, but really, I don't think I can really class it as that. It is The Secret World of Sleep, and I chose it because I had been going through a patch of not sleeping very well, and I thought that maybe it would give me some insight, but actually it's written by a neurologist who works in a sleep disorders clinic, actually in hospital in London, and the book covers these different sleep conditions than, you know, a mild case of insomnia or restlessness, you know. But I will say I found it fascinating. It's not really anything I knew that much about. And apart from, you know, it's not just anecdotes about these patients. He really goes into their kind of case history and then the science and the treatment. So what's happening in their brain as they're experiencing this condition, and then the treatment afterwards. And so it's fascinating. I will say there are points where it gets very scientific, and that really, my brain just like shut off, just glaze over. But I do think, beyond that, I don't think it really hinders it too much, because you grasp what he's trying to say, and the conditions covered are very interesting. So, yeah, not a conventional, or actually, I don't even think it would ever class itself as self-development. I think it's just interesting. If you like learning about these type of things, then it's worth it. I think, obviously not in that category, I think it is fair. I think Now We're Talking is a good place for it to live. Next, we have Mr. Fred Rogers himself, and this was a booklist book, and I think it was the memoir category, and it's called The Good Neighbour, and it basically goes over the life and career of Fred Rogers, who I did not know about at all prior to reading this, and I actually read the blurb for the first time on a video, so yeah, I really didn't know what I was going in for. I would say Fred was clearly an incredibly inspirational, amazing man who achieved, history. And I really do hope that children's TV creators, producers, writers still try and keep that emotional intelligence aspect that he so dearly fought for. My issue comes with the writing of the book itself, in that it is long and the font be small, and it was a real slog to get through, let me tell you. I think it's so too overly detailed. There are just some things that you just, I don't know, maybe if you're a fan of him, sure, but there were some bits that I didn't feel like I really needed to know, because it didn't impact his life or career at all. It was his hobby. But also, there was so much repetition in there, because it was trying to go in chronological order, but then jumped around and then repeated itself, and then when you go forward it repeats itself again. I don't need to know 4 times about this one moment in his history. So that got really frustrating by the end, and I actually was pretty desperate to finish. It actually really slowed down and messed up my reading for the month, because it was only the second book I read in the month. So yeah, I feel really bad putting it there. I think, I'm going to put it here. I'm going to put Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. It was not a book for me. And as much as I said that I love reading about people's lives, and I did find learning about his achievements very insightful, I didn't like anything else really about it. I didn't like the way it was written at all. So, Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. The last personal choice book to talk about today is book 4 in the Thursday Murder Club series, and the last one I'm pretty sure that he's read so far. No, written so far. And that is The Last Devil to Die. Same main characters. This time, I think the story and the crime itself was a little weaker than the others. And I will say, as funny as it still is in parts, and it has its quirkiness, the whole series has retained that. There is such a sad undertone in this book that I was sobbing throughout. And I was worried going in, having read the blurb, that was going to be the case. And yeah, it was. So just, if you're not there yet, prepare yourself. I'm not sure where to put this one, to be honest, because I don't actually think it deserves to be up here. I did like it, and I really hope he does write more. It doesn't feel like the end of this series, and I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that there are going to be more. So I think I'm going to have to put this one down there. I didn't like it as much as the other two, but I did still really enjoy it, and it definitely hasn't put me off reading any more that Richard Osman chooses to write in the future. The last self-development book is called Get Your Shit Together. It's pretty much, it pretty much sets out to do what it says, in that it's trying to give you very straight-talking, no-nonsense advice about how to sort your life out, and it does try and cover different aspects of your life. I think it kind of misses the mark a little bit for me, in that it's quite vague, and it can be there is quite a bit of repetition in there, but it also, it's like, you want a job, go get a job. Okay. I don't know. I think this is probably really useful for somebody starting out in their self-development journey. And there were a couple of things, one in particular, about how to structure to-do lists that I found useful. Would I say I found most of it useful? No. I think in parts it does try too hard to be funny, more than give you the content. I mean, is it mid? Is it don't waste your eyes? I know she's written quite a lot of these types of books, and there's no way I will read. I actually think I'm going to put it here, because there's no way I'm going to pick up any of her other books after reading that one. So, yeah, I think don't waste your eyes. There's no point. There are better books out there, as you can see on my tier list, that will help you a lot more. Alright, so the last book is actually the last category of my book list. So The Cruel Prince wrapped up my whole book list. So it's actually very fitting for this video. It was I'm going to say young adult fantasy. Have I said that already? Yeah, I have. Oh, you know what? I think The Children of Blood and Bone was debut author. Or maybe this was debut author. Who knows? Either way, it's a fantasy book. That was in a category in the 2018 book list, Goodreads Book Awards. And it's more like, whereas the others that I've spoken about in this video are more like mythology, this feels more kind of fairy tale-esque, mainly because the world is like goblins, pixies, imps, that kind of thing, which to me always makes me think of fairy tales. But obviously it's a much more mature take on it, serious take on it. And the two worlds exist, like there's a human world and there's a fae world. I didn't know what I was going to think of this book when I went into it, purely because of the world. And because I'm not an avid fantasy reader, it takes me a while to take it seriously. I guess that it's not a joke or a spoof book. But I did really like it. I really like the main character, Jude. Yeah, Jude. I really like the story. I wouldn't say it's the fastest moving in the world, and I have seen people not like the book as much because of that. I would say it is more political than action. But for me as a newcomer into fantasy reading, I actually liked that. I liked that it was more of a slower build. I already know from choosing my next book list that the second in the series, which I think is called The Wicked King, is on that list. So I'm glad that I get to read the second one to see how the story develops. I'm intrigued enough that I do actually want to read the second, whereas Children of Blood and Bone, I'm not that fussed if I don't ever read the others. So yeah, I think that for that reason, I think it's pretty obvious that it would go into Please Sir, May I Have Some More? Because I want to read the rest of it. So, that's it. That is all 36 books that I have read so far up until the end of June. So in December, you'll have to come back and see what I thought of the other books. I'm hoping to get to 70, so you'll see by then if I manage to do it or not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you agree, if you would rank any differently, and as ever, if you have any suggestions of books similar to the ones I've ranked up high, let me know. Love to add them to my TBR. I'm doing more themed months, as you will see in last week's video. Go check that out. And then in my future wrap-ups. So, yeah. Nothing left to say apart from